growing up in a city has it's somewhat makes me, I just think it's really interesting because I think it makes me value trees and nature much more, which is kind of ironic. But I think having those two places to contrast add more meaning to them as well. And so it just opens up more things in my brain in terms of, okay, how can we link the two together? And thinking about different challenges of like, how do we bring more green spaces about in an equitable way to people? And like, yeah, like, so health was another thing I was interested in. So like health and how that can be impacted by nature and being in the city and access to nature overall. And also something that comes up too is that I think being the very first person in my family to go to university, I felt like the added cultural layer and expectations of working in a sector that is highly valued and respected. I don't necessarily think forestry is probably the first thing that my Asian parents thought about, but it obviously is very different. Like I've created and carved a space and been able to do that for myself. And so I think it shows them what forestry can look like. Obviously in a different country setting, but that, the conversations are changing, especially in the time where they grew up. And so that also, I would say, adds like a layer to the relationship that I have with the work, the land, family, and identity as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate your insights because for a lot of the other folks who are participants, like I asked people that I went to school with. So they were kind of already sort of in the environmental field. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you kind of like found your way to it more through other interests. And I think that's really like interesting, valuable. I'm really glad to just have that as an additional perspective to be part of this project.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks. No, it's true. I think a lot of my journey into this space has been because of personal interest or curiosity and circumstance. Someone has told me once, and it stuck with me, but he said, "I think the forest found you." So I think so too, and it's welcome, and that's what also motivates me. I think to bring other people and share my story because I think it's much more common than people think it is. And so, and I'm sure you're doing that too. Like, I think these stories are a really great way to show people that you can get into this space. I think too, like in activism and the work that we often see in terms of like environmentalism or like traditional environmentalism, it seems like you have to always be on the front lines or like always have a big action. And I think there's many other ways to do that work too, like storytelling being one of them. So I think it's a really good platform to be able to showcase that.
I appreciate sort of your story and your background as well, and sort of like demonstrating how you can have sort of different interests and sort of integrate the environment into it. And it's also the other way around too, where you can be interested in the environment and integrate it into other issues. Because, like, as you mentioned, it impacts like everything else. So,
Mhm.
just, yeah, again, really appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
So, for the next question, how might your various intersectional identities have affected these powerful moments? And this is sort of just opening space for you to comment on any intersectional identities you would like to in regards to sort of environment, nature, environmentalism, and land, or like add on to anything else that you've said before.
I love this question because I really think that like our ability to care about issues. So like, for myself, obviously it's forests and trees, is your ability to connect with it like on a personal level and feel like you're able to make an impact on it or have a say in it. And I think the the environment that we live in now, in terms of like also the tone internationally, for example, on involvement of underrepresented groups. So like women, people of color, looking at environmental racism, for example. Those are all forms of discussion that obviously are very complex, but I think have also provided a really great space to take up. So I would say, like, as a woman, as a person of color, it's given me a lot of agency to say my piece, just take up space in general in forestry, because I know that, the lived experience that I come with, like just my identity and just having this identity, and, another identity would be a young professional, I think is really powerful, and it has a lot of value in shaping the spaces that we're going to see in the next, 10 years. And pretty sure we're at that point where it's going to be extremely important to take those in. And so I think, yeah, that like the being able to be comfortable with my identity has helped find a place and find a voice and have that agency to kind of push things forward, or question things, or also make space for new people, because I think that's also equally valid. But I think something I'm also realizing in that discussion and progression is like, how do you continuously make space for people? Because it's not just about having, youth thrown into every sentence that you do, or like, not just having them in one steering committee or like an event or something, but really actually giving them the space, or like encouraging them to build on those opportunities because of their identities, right? And to get the experience that they need, for example, to make change or work on their passions. Yeah, and I think it ties into the last question, where I feel like growing up in Canada, there's a very specific perspective on what environmentalism looks like traditional environmentalism, compared to somewhere like Vietnam. So I always think about what would have happened if I grew up in Southeast Asia, because I think that conversation is very different and it looks really different, and people sometimes forget that.